Nilkant Mishra, from your lens, possible rapprochement between China and the United States, what impact might it have on India? India has been one of the beneficiaries, or at least tried to position itself as a potential beneficiary of the China plus one pivot in global supply chains that a lot of companies seem to be engineering. If China and the US are no longer at loggerheads in the way that they've seemed to be over the past several months, how does that impact the India story and the India pitch?
So the strategic competition between China and the US is not getting over, right? So the fact that China wants to be the preeminent economy by 2049 and the US is saying game on is not going to change because Xi Jinping goes to California, right? This is a temporary cooling of temperatures. I think the strategic competition is not ending. The fact that most American corporates, because of what's happening in China, because of Chinese domestic policies, not just because of the US-China trade war, are now wanting to create alternatives. That's also not something that's going to change. I think the China plus one, and to the extent that India is benefiting from it, those trends, I think, will persist. I think it's very unlikely that with one summit meeting or the spirit of Bali continuing, you will see a complete winding down of all the moves that have been made. So remember that they will remain strategic competitors. If there is a cooling of temperatures, if there is better discussion on multilateral issues, on global issues of climate change, of financing the green transition, I would say that this would be in India's interest. We will see the world thinking as one. We are already we are 18% of the world population. We would be among the, in any case, very badly affected by climate change. So if we see the two big economies, the two big powers coming together and thinking together on some global issues, that's in India's interest.
Okay, there are two big elections. I just want to spend a little bit of time on them before we wrap up. I'll start, Martin Wolf, with you, talking about the potential impact of the US presidential elections on America's growth, depending on whether President Biden gets re-elected, if he were to actually contest, and what if Donald Trump were to come in. How, in your view, might that impact what's happening from an economic prism globally and particularly in the US?
May I just say first, I agree completely with what Mr. Mishra said about the wider implications of the competition between the US and China, and that fits into the question you asked. I believe that the next election in the United States is among possibly the most important elections anywhere in my lifetime. The really big question is what it does to the U.S. stance in the world, and to actually the functioning of U.S. democracy. I believe that under Donald Trump, the U.S. would become really significantly more isolationist, certainly significantly more protectionist. It would therefore withdraw from many of its overseas commitments, for example, in Europe, but also increasingly in Asia, with one crucial exception, the confrontation with China, on which he will focus, and where that will go, we really don't know. And of course, the election of Donald Trump will be the election of somebody who, let's be quite blunt about it, tried to organize a coup against the outcome of the last presidential election. That's a pretty massive fact. So I believe it's going to be very, very significant, very difficult for world trade, quite unpredictable for the world economy. The trade part will clearly be worse, but geopolitically, it will create quite enormous uncertainties about the future order. It is crucial to remember that to now, this may change, we live in the world that the United States created. And if the United States essentially abandons that creation, it repudiates that creation in many ways, we're going to live in a different world.